Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel, and I have been waiting to say this for what feels like an eternity, but Celtic are back. We, once again, will play a real football match this Sunday as we head to Tynecastle, so it's finally time to talk about the real thing. And I don't mean the very famous 1970s soul band, I mean the real football. We're back. If you haven't already, please make sure to hit like and subscribe. It would be much appreciated. Thankfully, we've made it to the end of a very difficult international break. We've had literally nothing to talk about. We've made the most of it. Through a lot of nonsense and a lot of virtual Celtic, we have made it here. So thank you for sticking around. Hopefully we're back to the regularly scheduled programming. And apologies through this video if you keep hearing the wind batter against the walls. Storm Bobo, or whatever it's called, is making its way through the scheme. So, apologies for that. Also, very quickly, before we get off to the start of this video, there's no Celtic the Thunder this week, as you'll notice. Apologies for that. We couldn't get a space booked in the podcast studio this week, so we'll be back with you some point next week, either before the Atletico game or after the Atletico game. Don't worry, we haven't gone away. We just couldn't get a space to record. So for fans and listeners of the show, we'll be back shortly. Celtic are back in action on Sunday. We head to Tynecastle for that 2:15 kickoff, the very weird kickoff time for a Sunday afternoon, in hopes to continue what has been a great start to our Premiership campaign. Now, Tynecastle is a venue where Brendan Rodgers has had his struggles in the past, but let's hope that's all behind him. Let's hope that's all behind Celtic, and let's keep doing what we've been doing, and that's just winning games. We've had an almost impeccable start to the league season. We still sit top of the league, undefeated, 7 points clear. All the momentum is on Celtic's side, and Hearts are a team who've had a bit of a topsy-turvy start to the season, up and down, and you know, not a lot of consistency. So I feel like this is one of the times we should go to Tynecastle being very confident. Usually when we head there, they're solidified, over the past 2 or 3 years anyway, they've been solidified as the third best team in the country. It's no longer the case. I think there's a discussion for who the third best team in the country is. So yeah, we should be heading there with a lot of confidence. And Brendan Rodgers hopefully gets off to a start at Tynecastle like he did in his first tenure. Now, if you remember that, you'll love it. Some good news today before we get into the match preview, talking about Brendan Rodgers and talking about the great form of our side. Brendan Rodgers has been named Premiership Manager of the Month. He was given the staff the same treatment that Ange Postecoglou did, getting them all involved in the photo. You love to see it. Congratulations to Brendan. And then as well, Matt O'Reilly won Premiership Player of the Month, which was thoroughly deserved. He has been the best player in the league and the best player at Celtic anyway. So far this season. He's taken his game to another level, and it's nice to see him get rewarded for his fine form. So hopefully that's a little bit of motivation for both the manager and Matt O'Reilly to keep doing what they're doing. That partnership between the two seems to be really good. And let's see that great form continue. And he got his Denmark call up as well. Matt O'Reilly's living the life right now. So Hearts on Sunday then, let's talk about that. The injury update, we'll start with it because it's the best place to start, I feel. And for once this season, we head into a game with an injury update that is far more positive than negative. We are slowly and surely getting there back to our full strength side, and touch hair or wood, it's going to stay the same for the rest of the season. Of course, we are still without Liel Abada, who is injured until perhaps January, but with Luis Palma coming in and showing the form and the talent that he's got, I think we should be okay, especially domestically. But it's a good injury update. A couple of key players returning to the side, getting back into training, including one man who I've missed seeing and wanted to see more of, Mike Nawrowski. Big update on Mike Nawrowski. This was the manager's comments earlier this week. He said he's doing very well and trained over the last week or so, so we're virtually only really Stephen Welsh and Liel Abada, who will be hopefully back in December time. Thankfully, it's starting to ease off and we're starting to get numbers back in, and what's going to be a busy part of the season. You always know you will have injuries, that's just the nature of it. I just think at the beginning of the season, that aligned with new players coming in and trying to adapt and settle was a challenge. but the players have come through that really well, and things feel stable. We're excited about going forward. So Brendan Rodgers confirming that Mike Nawrocki is back in training. There's been a little bit more on the web floating about that he's ready to return to first team action on Sunday. The question is, should he be in the starting 11 on Sunday? That's the big one. It's a really difficult one because Nawrocki is someone who we have spent almost £5 million on. I think it was 4.3 million we spent on Mike Nawrocki. He was brought in to be the Carl Starfelt replacement, and in his first few games before he picked up the injury, he certainly looked like the real deal and he looked like the Carl Starfelt replacement. However, in his absence, we've had ourselves a guy who rise to a level we didn't know existed, and that's Liam Maldini-Scales, whose place in the team isn't exactly easy to take away from him at the minute. So a bit of competition in there for who starts alongside Cameron Carter-Vickers on Sunday afternoon. I think that being realistic and being honest about it, the long-term goal is going to be to establish a partnership between Mike Nawrocki and Cameron Carter-Vickers, because I think Nawrocki's showed that level in Europe. He's showed it for Legia Warsaw. He's showed it very briefly at Celtic when he first came into the side. He is someone that we've spent money on for a reason, and the goal is going to be to establish him as a first team player. However, I don't think it's going to be as simple for him to come back and take that spot right now. It's Liam Scales' jersey for the losing, and rightfully so, because he's held the fort really, really well, and he's stepped up in a moment of crisis for Celtic when a lot of people expected him to sink rather than swim, including myself. So it's going to be a tricky one for Nawrocki just to walk straight back into this team. And even over time, I think we will start to see the sway of minutes going in Nawrocki's direction. There's certainly a conversation and a headache for Brendan Rodgers. Ultimately, this weekend, I would be starting Scales. I'm going to cut straight to the point. Scales for me has to start this weekend. I hope we see Nawrocki come on the park. Brendan Rodgers has already shown this season he doesn't have any reservations or fears about switching out centre-halves during a game. Because usually in a game of football, you don't usually see centre-halves getting changed about. It's always attacking or midfield changes, you know? Especially back in the days when it was only 3 substitutes. Now it's 5, we've got a bit more leeway. But usually, anyway, they're kept for attacking or midfield changes, especially with Celtic when the defenders in a league game maybe don't have as much work to do. But he's showed this season already. Look, he's gave Lagerbielke 45, he's gave Phillips 45, he's made changes in the back line and the centre-half positions when he's had to make sure people are getting minutes. So I hope that we see maybe Nawrocki come on in the second half and get minutes and get back up to match fitness. But Scales for me has to start, and there's one very important reason for that, and the key reason being Scales is going to start on Wednesday night. I think. It should be. Nawrocki can't. Nawrocki's not in the Champions League squad. So, for me, you've got to keep the good form rolling for Liam Scales. You've got to keep the confidence in him. You've got to keep the minutes in his legs. And he's been playing, which is good for Ireland as well, over the international break. But don't just suddenly drop him and then bring him back in from the cold on Wednesday night. No. Let him go out there. Let him keep building that confidence, because Atletico is going to be one of our biggest games of the season, if not our biggest game of the season. So I think you've got to start Scales in that game to make sure he's going into Atletico with the mindset, the confidence and the match sharpness that's needed for such a big game. Yeah, maybe take him off 60, 70 minutes into the game and let Nawrocki come on and get some time in his legs. But for me, you can't drop Scales. You've got to keep him on. It's a real credit to Liam Scales, because I never imagined us sitting here having this conversation back at the start of the season, and he's taken this opportunity very well. He has single-handedly created a future for himself at the club, which many thought was non-existent. Fair play to the boy, because it's more than deserved. So let's talk about the opposition, shall we? Since I think we're dragging this on a little bit. Hearts, who we take on. This is Brendan Rodgers' record against Hearts in his first tenure as Celtic manager. Of course, hasn't taken them on yet in his second spell in charge. Surprisingly better than what I think some people and maybe the media will try and make out. Yeah, he had those 2 losses at Tynecastle, but look at that, 9 wins, no draws, 2 losses. So 11 games against Hearts, and he won 9 out of 11. I mean, that's a pretty good record. It's obviously just those 2 losses that stand out, of course. The 4-0 game, which brought to an end that magnificent 69-game unbeaten run. And then the 1-0 loss right at the start of the 2018-19 campaign. which I was in Zante for at the time, makes me feel old. Yeah, they kind of stand out, and it makes you kind of over-exaggerate it, doesn't it? Like, oh, he struggled against Hearts in the past. It's not really. He's won 9 out of the 11 games he's played against them, and for one of the sides who are meant to be one of the best in the country, it's a pretty respectable record. So I think that sometimes that gets exaggerated for the sake of a narrative, and it does add some spice to the game, because it's like, oh, Celtic could slip up when they rarely slip up. So I understand why the media do it, but I think it can just be a bit overdone. So a good record, hopefully continues that at Tynecastle this weekend, no banana peels. Hearts right now sit 4th in the Scottish Premiership table with a tricky start to the season, but recently they have started getting some results. They've got big wins against Aberdeen and Ross County in the league, and then of course that big win against Kilmarnock in the League Cup as they head to the semi-finals at Hampden. So they have picked up some big wins. However, the last game is the one that gives me the confidence that we're dealing with a Hearts side who aren't quite there yet. The Edinburgh Derby was the last game that Hearts took part in, an untelevised Edinburgh Derby as usual, but they were 2-0 up, and they bottled it. They drew 2-2 with Hibs. Hibs, who have been in a right mess, sacking managers to start the season, not looking great at all. Hearts 2-0 up, they bottle it and they draw 2-2. That for me sums up where the Hearts are at the minute, just a bit inconsistent, a bit... I think they are lacking their own identity since getting rid of Robbie Neilson. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. And I think that we're playing them at a point in time where, as I said earlier in the video, there's a lot more confidence to be had in us not going there and slipping up. So, yeah, Hearts in a really weird place at the minute. It's a bit hard to put your finger on. Because usually I like to talk about the style of football. And what to come up against. Usually when you're doing these match previews, a majority of the time you're coming at Celtic Park, you're playing against 10 men behind the ball, and there's not much of a style of football to talk about. But when you're playing the Hearts or the Hibs or an Aberdeen, there's something to talk about. They have got a style of football. And they might get a bit of a slagging for this off the Hearts fans who want to defend their side oh dearly, but I don't look at Hearts and see a real distinct style of football. I think that they're still in the stages of finding their footing under Stephen Naismith and the Everton. That's terrible of me, but the Everton. When I have managed to watch any of Hearts' football this season, whether it be on Sports Scene or whatever, I just look at them and I go, there's nothing there that's distinct. You know, there's nothing that makes me go, that's what they're setting out to do. This is what they are. I don't know. I think they're still, you know, that's what happens when you bring in someone. I think they went down the really cheap, easy and lazy route of appointing someone like Stephen Naismith. Yeah, I get it, he came in and he steadied the ship and he got some promising results, but really I think they could have pushed the boat out a little bit further and got someone who's actually experienced as a manager, has a system, and has established himself in the game. Hearts are a big club and they didn't do that, and now I think they're just at a point where, like, yeah, they'll get by this period of time hoping it either comes good or dealing with it when things go bad. And I don't know, it's weird. I'm not trying to see the future, because who knows, they might finish 3rd this season, they'll all be happy as Larry. I get that. But I don't know. They don't strike me as a side right now who have a clear vision of what they're doing. And maybe that's just me being an outsider and biased or whatever. Maybe Adam Kennedy will be on the phone to me after this, tell me I'm wrong. But yeah, I think we're in a good position to beat them. And no Robbie Neilson. Hey! Finally. Starting 11 predictions. Let's get through it very, very quickly. There it is on screen. No big surprises. I've already spoke around my decision to start Liam Scales alongside Cameron Carter-Vickers. The other big change that I've got there is Palma starting the game, compared to, you know, the last couple of games where it's been a bit of a guessing game. Palma needs to be starting now. From here until Abada's back, that front three picks itself for me. Aside from that, what else is there to say? Joe Hart comes back from suspension. Yeah, it's a pretty easy team to pick. Score predictions then. I'm going to go 3-1 Celtic. Yes, usually these games are like the 1-0s, the 2-1s. I'm going to say 3-1. Let's be a bit more adventurous, shall we? 3-1 Celtic. But listen, it'll be tough. I'm not saying that at no point in what I was saying about Hearts am I disregarding their quality or the ability to beat Celtic, because they're a good side. They've got good players throughout the team. They'll make this a difficult game. And listen, who knows, Celtic could drop points, but I'm feeling confident, so I'm going 3-1. Right then, that does it to start this wee run of football till the next international break. God, I don't even want... No, we're not talking about it. That's it. We're done. See you later. Like and subscribe.